This video is to introduce you to some of the famous places in Paris, and this would be an aerial view of part of Paris. There are a couple of things that you can see here. This gold dome is where Napoleon Bonaparte, he was the Emperor of France in the late 1700s, late 1700s, early 1800s, and he's buried under that dome. And here is Notre Dame Cathedral, and we'll see closer up pictures of all of this later. But last year it almost burnt to the ground because of an electrical fire. All right, this is a view of La Tour Eiffel, the Eiffel Tower, from the street that I used to live on in Paris. This street is called Rue Saint-Dominique, and it was about a 10-minute walk from my apartment to the Eiffel Tower. And again, this is a picture of Napoleon's tomb. It is connected to a military museum. The rest of this is a military museum. And this is a picture of La Tour Eiffel after it was just finished in the late 1800s. And again, another picture from the street that I lived on. Here's a good picture of La Tour Eiffel. It's about 1,000 feet high, and they built it for the World's Fair of 1889. It was begun in 1887 and finished in 1889 in only 2 years. And the architect was a man called Gustave Eiffel. And they used to think back then that this is what they knew about science. If you were to build a structure that was 1,000 feet high, you could actually touch the sky. La Tour Eiffel. They light it up at night, and on special occasions they change the colors of the lights. It can be very dramatic. This is l'Arc de Triomphe. Napoleon, the emperor, had this built to commemorate, that means to remember, his troops. And you can go up to the top here. In fact, you can see right here, these little teeny dots are actually people. And there's another picture. And another picture of l'Arc de Triomphe, the Arch of Triumph. And if you look down from the Arc de Triomphe, this is what you see. This is one of the largest avenues in the world. This is called Les Champs-Élysées. And you'll find some really expensive stores on this street. And people that live on this street are really, really rich. And this is a picture from the Champs-Élysées looking back at La Tour Eiffel. There are 12 roads that lead into a circle that goes around the Arc de Triomphe. And they call it l'Étoile because it looks like a star. This is Place de la Concorde. This is the obelisk. It was given to France by Egypt as a friendship offering. Again, this is Les Invalides in the military museum in front of Napoleon's tomb. And this is where Napoleon is buried. He's inside of a really small coffin that's inside a bigger coffin that's inside a bigger coffin that's inside a bigger coffin. And then on the outside is really thick marble. And this structure is probably 2.5, 3 stories high. So it's as tall as a house. This is the famous Opéra. There's a story about the Opéra, and it was said that this woman had a baby, and the baby was deformed, and the mother thought that she could not take care of a deformed baby, so she left it at the Opéra, and this baby grew into a man that learned all the operas that were performed there, and he lived in the rafters, and no one ever saw him. And he is known as the Fantôme de l'Opéra, the Phantom of the Opera. It's said that sometimes when it's really quiet in the opera, you can hear him singing. But again, this was just a story, it didn't really happen. Here's another picture of the opera. And this is the inside. And again, the famous Fantôme de l'Opéra, which was a famous movie and also a famous Broadway musical. This is where the story takes place, is at the Opéra. This is Notre Dame Cathedral. And this is the church that took more than 200 years to finish building. And unfortunately, this part of the building back here burned down. The bell towers were left standing. And you may have seen the Disney film, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and his name was Quasimodo, and this was where he lived, was in one of the bell towers. And again, it's just a story, it didn't really happen. This is the front of Notre Dame, the bell towers. And when they were building Notre Dame, they put these gargoyles, les gargouilles, on the church, these figures that looked like monsters, and they thought that they would keep evil spirits away from the church. They also act as gutters to drain water off the top of the church, and the water comes out of the gargoyles' mouths and onto the street. Here's one of the famous gargoyles. The Louvre Museum is one of the most famous museums in the entire world. It houses one of the most famous paintings called La Joconde in French. We know it as the Mona Lisa. And they built this modern-looking pyramid as one of the new entrance. You have to go down an escalator of the pyramid, and once you get downstairs, you can buy your ticket. Then you go up another escalator into the museum. And here's another picture of the entrance to the Louvre Museum. And this is the back. This is the Joconde. This was the old placement. It now has a new home behind photo glass that doesn't allow flash photography to get through. The flash from the cameras was actually eating the paint off the picture. La Seine is the river that runs through Paris. And Le Métro is the underground train system, kind of like our MARTA, but it's much more elaborate. You can get out within a block of anywhere you need to go. And this is the Cimetière Père Lachaise. It's one of the famous cemeteries in France. And one of the leaders of one of the 1960s most famous groups, The Doors, his name is Jim Morrison, he's buried here. There are also other famous people buried here. The Moulin Rouge is a famous place where you can see Las Vegas type entertainment. And this is the original Statue de la Liberté. So the original Statue of Liberty is on a little island here in the Seine River, and France duplicated that and gave it to the United States for our 100th birthday in 1876. This is the Sacré-Cœur Cathedral. It's on the highest point in Paris called Montmartre, and again, it's a Catholic church. This is the Sorbonne. It's the University of Paris, very famous. And the Château de Versailles is where the King Louis XIV and Louis XVI lived. Louis XVI actually was the king whenever the poor people revolted and they started the French Revolution. They were tired of the king keeping all their money for taxes, and people didn't have anything to eat, so they got all the army's guns. They stormed the Bastille, which was a building where the army kept their guns, and they got all the guns and they marched to Versailles, and they took the king hostage, and they brought him back into Paris, and eventually he was sentenced to death. And this is the Hall of Mirrors inside the Chateau de Versailles. And this is the back of the Chateau de Versailles. This is the neighborhood where I used to live. It's called the 7e arrondissement, the 7th district. Paris is divided into neighborhoods. There are 20 of them, and I was in the 7th one. And again, this is just pictures of the 7e arrondissement where I used to live. I used to buy meats here, and I used to go to the restaurant here, and there was a cheese store down the street from me. France makes over 360 different kinds of cheeses. The French like flowers a lot more than Americans do. They buy them more often. And of course, France is known for its food. They get the freshest vegetables, and they have the best pastries that you'll ever taste. The bouquinistes are lined up along the Seine River. You can find old books here and interesting books. And this is the Modern Art Museum in Paris. Okay, there's one more part, and we'll do that one later.